Nick Fuentes is a dissident right-wing alternative media creator who we're going to be reviewing momentarily. Infamous Nick Fuentes, who created a video called The PSYOP to Undermine the Mass Awakening. I'm going to pause intermittently in order to inject commentary into the video, but we're going to see what Mr. Nick Fuentes has to say to the masses.
I also want to talk tonight about Tucker Carlson's comments with Alex Jones. Sort of interesting. I smell.
Christian Vlaris with the $20 for the CCP militia. Appreciated, King. Very much appreciated.
A PSYOP. I detect. I'm sensing a disturbance. There is a major effort underway to undercut the mass awakening of the people, of Americans, about Israel, race, Jewish power, all these things that years ago were totally taboo. People that discussed them were radioactive. As you know, there is a mass awakening happening. Millions and millions of people, I think largely thanks to TikTok and thanks to X and the liberalization of both of those platforms, as well as events, October 7th, and many of the lies from the past 10 years starting to crumble. People are really discovering the truth. And I've noticed just today, but especially in the past few weeks and months, there seems to be a concerted, organized effort underway to undercut the credibility of the people that are amplifying those types of ideas. People that are talking about race, about Israel, about Jewish power in ways that are not approved. And we know what that means. People that are talking about these ideas, which are called politically incorrect or called hateful, bigoted, racist, anti-Semitic. There is a concerted effort underway to attack the credibility of the people pushing those ideas and the credibility of those ideas themselves.
Okay. And then Sapien Green for 100 DKK for the mass awakening or something. I wasn't paying attention. Thank you, King. Appreciated. So hold on. Let's break this down a little bit because I think that we can pull an Uno reverse card on this a little bit. Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones were talking, and Nick Fuentes feels that there is a psychological operation in order to undermine the people who are race realists and critical of Jewish international power in Israel, that it's taboo. However, these things have been leaking through TikTok and through X, which is funny because, you know, X was purchased by Elon Musk, and then I would say the terms of service were very limited, or excuse me, were very much changed, so the dissident right can say whatever it wants on X. And then people are waking up to Israel as like a threat to international stability or something like that. Now, concerted, organized effort to undercut the credibility of people involved in these ideas. What I would say is, I'll just be straight up. I am interested in undermining the credibility of the ideas of Nick Fuentes, and I am, interested in undermining the credibility of himself as a person, because I think that he's leading plenty of men into black pill and red pill circles that make them worse human beings. And also, you know, this is the way that I was raised. A century ago, anti-Semitism was so bad that Jews, through virtue of being Jewish, I'm not Jewish, by the way, were rounded up and executed for immutable characteristics in the hundreds of thousands at minimum, even according to Nick Fuentes. That's like his minimum number. His minimum number of Jews that were slaughtered in the Holocaust was 300,000, which is already bad. But the historical record states that it was like 6 million people, right? And so would it be a good idea to debate Nick on this topic? Sure. I'll talk to Nick. I don't care. I think I even DM'd him and said that I wanted to reconnect because we have talked once in the past and he wasn't interested in reconnecting. I'll happily reconnect with Nick. I don't care. Concerted, organized effort to undercut the credibility. So I'm interested in undermining his credibility. I'm interested in undermining his narrative because the fear, the anxiety is that he's going to justify anti-Jewish racial bigotry and ethno-religious bigotry in the Western world. And then he's also going to embolden Israel's enemies to the point that they might be looking at a mass slaughter. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't criticize the state of Israel. For example, earlier today, we covered a news story where Israel bombed a shelter that killed 23 people and like burned to death several people in tents. That's obviously evil. That's terrible. Now, the question is, what's the solution? The solution isn't the destruction of the state of Israel. The solution isn't the political disempowerment of international Jewry, as Nick the Knife Fuentes would articulate it. The solution is just to be aware of the sins of the government of the state of Israel, aware of the sins of individual Jews in the world, but also to valorize the good things that Israel does and to valorize the good contributions of Jewish people to the world. It takes a lot more, I don't know, brain power to recognize that all of humanity is flawed and to give people credit where it's due and criticism where it's due. But either way, I'll just admit, I am one of the people interested in undermining Nick Fuentes. He's correct. Let's see what else he has to say.
Simultaneously, there is an effort underway to astroturf people who sound like they're saying what we're saying and are approved, but are not actually saying what we're saying. And what I mean by that is they have correctly identified that someone like myself is independent, outside control. Someone like myself, I'm a legitimate nationalist, legitimately questioning what is considered unquestionable or undeniable, whether we should support Israel, whether there is such a thing as Judeo-Christianity, whether we should have Jewish people that don't believe in Jesus, don't like Jesus, whether they should be in power, questioning whether we should have multiracialism. Is that desirable? Is it beneficial? Is it even workable? You'll have someone like myself who is a legitimate alternative to the system. They attack my credibility, and simultaneously they're offering up another option, which is an approved option, and they do their best to sound like they're saying what I'm saying, but they're not really. They sound like they're saying the same thing, and they're promoted and elevated, but they're only sounding like they're saying it. They're not actually saying it. So they'll say, well, we don't really like that we give Israel foreign aid. But should Israel exist? Oh, absolutely. And, are Jewish people in general too supportive of Israel? Well, no, we can't generalize at all. Should we live in a Christian country? Should we have multiracialism? Of course we can make multiracialism work. And it's like, okay, so we're actually not saying quite the same thing. And so I want to talk about that tonight as well. 3 examples: Tucker, Tim Pool, and Joe Rogan today. We'll break down what each of them said. I posted this on Twitter this afternoon. I said, it's weird. It's all happening on the same day. So we'll talk about that too. Should be a pretty good show. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. And I guess we'll just dive right in because this is pretty timely stuff.
So what I don't like about this implication is that this perspective can't be genuinely held. Okay. So the approved option, this is like socially palatable. We don't like foreign aid to Israel. This is like kind of like a MAGA point that nobody really cares about, where effectively like MAGA is arguing against foreign aid in general and has like an isolationist stance. But plenty of them make exception for the state of Israel because we have the Judeo-Christian narrative. And that's the narrative that he wants to question, is whether or not there is such a thing as Judeo-Christian. What's hilarious about the Hasidic Jew narrative, we just watched Mordecai as a part of that Sneeko segment, is that if you wanted to accuse Mordecai of being a religious supremacist, you could make that argument. Now, he would probably say, well, I don't actually think that you're like evil and bad and I want you to die. I just think that my religion is correct, right? We can still live together. We can still function in a society together. However, my religion is ultimately correct, and you have a misunderstanding of the Abrahamic faith. And so Nick actually accepts that from the opposite direction, which is that Christianity is separate from Judaism, where everything that Jesus said actually does contradict the Old Testament, and therefore it's the better, more approved religion. Right. And so they're effectively both religious supremacists. I mean, he even says that he's a race realist Christian nationalist, and he's not even sure if multiracialism is like a workable concept in the United States of America. Now, I want to point this out, though. We live in a functioning society, okay? We have one of the largest economies in the world. We have massive cultural exports. You can debate whether or not those exports are good or bad. I like Marvel films sometimes. I like Star Wars films sometimes. I like Warhammer 40,000. I like Western, media products. And so as a result, I think there's nothing there's nothing really terrible going on. I live in a decent neighborhood. My kids go to decent schools. Central Florida in general is like a really rich, lush, vibrant, food-filled place. And of course we have economic problems, but it's not like I'm living in this, like, I don't know, this hovel, this bombed out hovel filled with like race war. That's not the reality outside of my property. And this kid, no offense, Nick, acts like it is, or acts like we're on the precipice of race war. I don't think it's real if you engage with the outside world, right? And so being a civic nationalist, I think, is actually the obvious solution for the United States of America. And Tucker, Tim Pool, and Joe Rogan, I would trust Tim Pool and Joe Rogan. Tim Pool, I think, has lost the plot. Joe Rogan loses the plot some of the times. And I think Tucker is insane some of the times. I trust these people to have like a firmer beat on what reality is than Nick. 100%.
And I want to get to everything tonight. I know past couple nights we haven't gotten to everything that I want to talk about. So our first story, before we get into the news, I want to break down what I just mentioned, this concerted effort that's underway right now to undercut the truth and truth tellers. And in the first place, I want to say it is obviously unprecedented what has been happening. And when I say what is happening, I mean the fact, which is obvious now, that people seem to be waking up. Everyone is noticing this. Everyone is noticing, and everyone is noticing that everyone's noticing. I get people all the time now super chatting my show, texting me. They say, oh, my boomer dad watches you now. Oh, my boomer uncle watches your show. Oh, my boomer dad just said we shouldn't support Israel. Everyone is getting red-pilled. Everyone is getting red-pilled. And the two big subjects that I think you can properly consider red pills are Jews and race. Those are the two big red pills. Properly understood, the two big red pills are that Jews control our world. And I'm saying that in a very crude way. Of course, I would say it in a way that's a little more nuanced, but properly understood, to put it simply. It's that Jews have a lot of power. They're using that power to get our country to support Israel. It is because they have power, which is why they're beyond criticism. They use their power to punish those that criticize them. And they use their power to obfuscate the fact that they have the power, because that in itself is a scandal. And people are coming to the realization that this is the dynamic and this is what's happening in our country. The second part is race, which is that the biggest unspoken trend in the world today is that countries that were white, countries that were racially European, and I'm talking about the countries in Europe, but I'm also talking about the settler countries like Australia, Canada, the United States. Countries that were white are becoming not white. This is huge. It's massive. It's still massive. It's a massive trend, and it's global. Everywhere where there previously were white majorities or white rule, now there is not. The United States is now 60% white, and the number's going down all the time. Canada has doubled its population this century and is on its way to be 10% white by the end of the century. Same could be said of Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy. You just have this influx of immigrants, and they're all not white.
Okay. So I want to address this head on, and I want to, I don't want to infer his narrative. I want to tell you what I think is going on, and he can try to contradict what I'm going on, or what I think is going on. Grassroots Chapter 1 says, I'm horribly behind again. No problems, buddy. Christian Blair says, and Trump will say something in support of Israel and all these MAGA DSers will change their mind. They will, but he won't, and the Groypers won't. The Groypers are actually quite critical of Nick the Groypers and Nick are quite critical of Trump that he is so allegiant to Israel. The cult follows one man and one man only. I mean, that's true that Nick he was like, oh yeah, Trump betrayed the MAGA movement. Trump betrayed, white America. I'm going to go to all the states and then campaign against him and we're going to do damage. And he was trying to like mobilize his audience in order to get ready to go to war with MAGA. And then nothing came out of it. Nothing came out of it. Jeez, Christian, getting a little spicy, huh? Grassroots for $5 says, I aspire to be the controlling Jew Nick Fuentes thinks I am. Right now, I'm just a guy with a job listening to autism on the internet. Right. Nick would benefit from a debate with Mordecai, the Hasidic Jew. He really would, because he would be like, oh, well, don't you support the state of Israel? And he'd be like, actually, no, I don't. I think they're all secular Jews and they're insufficiently religious. A conversation with Mordecai would blow Nick's mind, okay? But all right, let's break down what he said and provide an alternative narrative that I think is more realistic, okay? Undercut the truth, right? Not a truth. He's not talking about how he has facts. He's talking about how the narrative surrounding his facts is 100% accurate. I think that's crazy pants, but I also think that's why he has a cult of personality. He offers certainty in a confusing and scary world. He says that the two biggest red pills that need to be swallowed by people are Jews, international Jewish power in the state of Israel, how international Jews rally countries to support the state of Israel when otherwise there would be no obligations. And then they try to obscure the fact that they use their power and maneuver that power into supporting the state of Israel. So let's address this first. The narrative, the historical narrative, I'll try to be very brief, is that the Jews went out of Egypt 1200 before Christ. They conquered the land of Canaan and they established kingdoms. They then underwent like the Babylonian exile, the conquest by the Greeks, and the conquest by the Romans. Then there was a mass slaughter of Jews because they rebelled against the Romans several times, mass slaughter of the Jews and the destruction, I think, of the Second Temple. Then for another 1,000 years, they vaguely lived in that area in Judea and Israel and, modern Palestine. And the Romans renamed it to Palestine, effectively in order to give the middle finger to the Jews. Whether or not that's true, who knows? But it's part of the narrative. Then in the year, I forget if it's like 1200 or 1000, I forget. But in one of the Crusades, Jerusalem is sacked by the Crusaders and everyone in the city is put to the sword, including massive amounts of Jews. And so at that point, the Jews are like, okay, F this. We're tired of getting slaughtered. We're tired of getting our butts kicked. We're tired of getting conquered. We're going to do the diaspora. So what they do is they move into every country on the world. They literally travel as far as China in order to try to be a minority in other countries, but also not get slaughtered. There are pogroms that happen, racial and ethno-religious persecutions, but the Jews ultimately survive that. Okay? Love you, baby. And then what happens is in the 18th and 19th century, there's a push by secular Jews, but also Jews in general, in order to establish a Jewish majority homeland in the state of Israel, which doesn't exist at the time. They literally have to build it. So there's mass migrations into the early 20th century, and then Hitler mass slaughters European Jewry, which causes a push and pull factor for all the Jews to relocate to Israel. Finally, I guess I say finally, in the early stages of the establishment of Israel, there is hostility from Europe. There is hostility from the Middle East and North Africa to the new state of Israel. But what happens is over the ensuing decades, Europeans, because they feel guilty about World War II, and Americans, because they feel the Holocaust was a uniquely abhorrent genocide because it industrialized slaughter, they end up supporting Israel for pragmatic and historical reasons, right? Diaspora, I think it's diaspora. I don't know, and I don't care. But the point is, that's effectively the narrative. So you could say that like international Jews, Jews who were a part of the diaspora, they have some level of vague support for the state of Israel. And then you can also say that Israel is interested in its own survival. These are not like contradictory or like horrible revelations to realize. As a matter of fact, if you ask international Jews or if you ask the state of Israel, they'd be like, yeah, we're trying to survive. We're trying not to get murdered. Okay, based. What's the problem? Right? So I'm sure he'll articulate the problem. And then countries that became white, you're going to have to indulge me another rant. I'll try to be brief. Because of the industrial and sexual revolution, the birth rate has plummeted to below 2 in the developed world. We are using migration in order to try to make up for the collapsing birth rate. To my knowledge, condoms and the Industrial Revolution were not Jewish inventions. And even if they were Jewish inventions, modern people love condoms and love the Industrial Revolution so much, we're not going back. So now what?
And they're changing how these countries are. It is their race, which is changing how these countries are. It's changing how they look, obviously. It's changing how they are. And you see it in the slums, ethnic enclaves, ghettos. You see it in the heterogeneity in our major cities. It's a country that doesn't look the same, doesn't feel the same, and objectively, it's getting worse. And we all understand that this is something.
It's not objectively getting worse, okay? Violence is half of that it was in 1990. We're actually doing substantively better in like healthcare, technology, consumer goods, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to say that this is all goy slop consumer BS and that it's a spiritual decay, we could have a conversation about spiritual decay. But he can't use the word objectively getting worse when if you look at the metrics of what actually affects people's day-to-day lives, while I will argue we're in a K economy that needs to be recalibrated in order to support working class and middle class families, there are tons of metrics about human life in the developed world that indicate that it's actually gotten better in the past 30 years. So I disagree with Nick. Ann Sneed says, I'm 65 and I'm loving this. I've been waiting for someone to explain this all and pull the young men towards the right or towards the right wing. Thanks for what you're doing. Well, Ann Sneed, thank you for being here. I appreciate the comment. Grassroots Hegemon says, the condoms thing was me, my bad. All right, everybody boo Grassroots Hegemon. Boo. The Industrial Revolution and contraception is Grassroots Hegemon's fault. Boo. Focus Lady says, Nick the Dull Knife only speaks in simplistic talking points. He could be very easy to debate. Well, you say that, Focus Lady, but he's way more intelligent than you give him credit for, okay? One of the things, I got a comment in my last Nick Fuentes segment. They're like, oh, you said that Nick is dumb. No, I'll never say that Nick is dumb. Nick is not dumb. Nick is not unintelligent. Nick is politically savvy. He has recruited tens of thousands of young men in order to follow him feverishly. That's actually the problem. I wouldn't be talking about him if he was dumb. He's not dumb, okay? Now, what I think that Focus Lady said that's accurate is he's taking these wildly complex things, like, I don't know, 3,500 years of Jewish history, and he's boiling it down to Jews control society and get us to support Israel, which is bad. Hasn't said how it's bad, but he says that it's bad. And then he said that racial issues are getting worse because we're mass importing immigrants who are creating ghettos, ethnic enclaves, and race is a real problem. But like I'm telling you, there are metrics for human life that have been increasing in the past like 6 decades, not decreasing. So no, he's not dumb, but he is offering a wildly simplistic narrative of reality.
Something that is happening probably intentionally. It's a question how intentional it is. There's clearly an agenda at work, and there's a question about what that agenda is, the why. We also understand it's being covered up. It's called a conspiracy. Now, whether you think it's a good thing, bad thing, it's not debatable whether it's happening. You could say it's good or bad, or negligible, but it's happening. The numbers don't lie. And yet it's called a conspiracy. And they say that it's the conspiracy of violent extremists, terrorists. If you notice what's happening, and it's significant. And once again, it's happening and it's significant, whether you think it's good or bad or neither, it's a significant change.
Okay. Right here, there's a liberal and progressive defense of minorities, which is fine. I think that, there's an Ayn Rand quote. I'm not a libertarian. As a matter of fact, I really have a strong distaste for libertarians. I think they have an overly simplistic worldview. However, the quote from Ayn Rand that I do agree with is that there is no minority smaller than the individual, right? So minority rights are, sorry, my leg went to sleep and that's painful. Minority rights are individual rights, right? And so liberals and progressives have an aligned mission in protecting the rights of individuals and minorities against the persecutions over their immutable characteristics. And so when you notice, quote unquote, I think a bunch of ham-fisted liberals and progressives from cosmopolitan cities reflexively defend brown and black people and Jews because they're afraid that you're trying to gin up effectively the outrage that will lead to pogroms and murders. And let's face it, there's been anti-black, anti-Hispanic, and anti-Jewish murders that have happened as a result of the sentiments that Nick is espousing. There was that, I forget where there was the synagogue attack, but there was a synagogue attack that I think killed 10 or 20 people. There was Dylan Roof with the attack on the black church that killed like 24 people. There was the New Zealand shooting where he went into 2 mosques and slaughtered like 70 people. Crazy pants. There was the terrorist in like, it was Norway or Finland, I forget. But he slaughtered like, I don't know, 80 of his countrymen. Because he believed that they were part of like the treacherous racial conspiracy. So you can say like, oh, well, it only happens now and then. It's not that big of a deal. Our ideology isn't explicitly calling for violence, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when people get blackpilled by this ideology is they do think like, oh my God, it's almost over. The white race is almost destroyed by international Jewry and racial minorities and mass immigration. I have to do something drastic in order to wake people up, and then they commit atrocities. So he can play dumb and say like, no, we're not calling explicitly for extrajudicial violence. But there are absolutely people who believe his descriptive reality and use it as a pretext for mass slaughter of innocent people. 100%.
And yet noticing it will get you labeled not just a hater and a conspiracy theorist.
I see Nick, I click. Well, welcome aboard, Razzle Cherry. There's somebody else in our chat called Razzle Smasher, and I mix you guys up for like 3 days. My apologies.
Called a liar, but also a violent person and a terrorist. People are becoming aware of all of it. They're becoming aware that diversity is actually not our strength. They're becoming aware that Israel is not our greatest ally, and people want to change it. It also is not even really a right-wing or a left-wing issue. It's just the truth. It's just common sense. And the truth has become popular as...
Sujin Pandi says, hey man, watching you from Croatia. Cheers. Croat brother, welcome aboard. Let's talk about Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia last night. I hope that you have won your independence and are enjoying your beautiful beaches.
Censorship has receded. We probably reached the pinnacle of censorship in 2021 in the middle of the COVID hysteria, and then shortly afterward, the Ukraine hysteria, the hysteria about the election on January 6th. Censorship probably reached its peak when Donald Trump, the sitting president, was banned from everything. And shortly thereafter, it started to recede. And there were some notable developments. TikTok became the dominant platform. TikTok became the fastest growing platform in the world right around that time, 2021, 2022. And TikTok was owned by ByteDance, a company which is headquartered in China. And TikTok did not have the kind of onerous speech regulations that Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube did at that time. And so as a consequence, because it was super competitive, grew very quickly, became a billion user platform more quickly than any of the others, And because it had these lax regulations, you had the rise of e-celebrities like Andrew Tate. And when the war in Gaza kicked off, there was so much pro-Palestine content on the platform. And a lot of content that highlighted some of the racial differences, the brawls, the meltdowns, the world star hip hop type of content, and a lot of right-wing creators. Then in 2022, Elon Musk acquired Twitter, turned it into a free speech zone. And almost as quickly as it became free speech and liberalized, it became a haven for right-wing content. And suddenly, just like on TikTok, there was pro-Palestine content. There was Israel critical content, very racial content, people criticizing Black people, criticizing immigration, other things. And so now we live in a time, 2025, and I've talked about this extensively, where we are in the middle of the biggest red pilling in history. And it's not just those two subjects, but it's other things too, conspiracy theories about 9/11.
So, yeah, this is all descriptively accurate, but I think it's important to note, particularly for liberals and progressives. There's a reason why this argument descriptively is important, okay? So from a centrist perspective, I agree that censorship reached its peak in 2021. Why is the government, like, now, I do think that people are very stupid, but why is the government allowed to regulate speech around infectious diseases? Now, you can argue that there's like a national health emergency. I agree. And I do think the government should do everything in its power in order to inform a free body of people. However, where is it written that the government can effectively regulate what you say on social media platforms in reference to an infectious disease? Are we free or are we not? Right? So that appeals to like my libertarian philosophical roots, I guess. And then, but here's the thing: is TikTok is a dominant social media platform owned by Chinese ByteDance. So if Nick is going to appeal to like manipulation, InfoWars, psychological operations, you have to understand that TikTok, I guarantee you, large amounts of people who contribute to TikTok are probably very earnest in their opinions. But I guarantee you, China is manipulating the algorithm in order to promote the most divisive content, because the most divisive content is going to have the most views. It's going to have the most bite. But they don't care if like TikTok has controversial topic in the American market that causes division. If anything, they're going to promote it because they're our rival, right? And so TikTok itself, the Chinese version, I guarantee you that there's things that exploit racial, religious sensitivities in China and or are critical of the CCP. I guarantee you all that content either gets throttled or banned. So to just like praise TikTok and being like, oh, this has been amazing for American expression of dissident ideas. It's like, yeah, it has been. It's also being capitalized upon by American rivals. And so you need to be like aware of that conflict of interest. The rise of Andrew Tate has sucked. I'm just going to be real. Sneeko and Nick Fuentes worshiping Andrew Tate is disappointing to me. Okay. I haven't really bumped into a clip or a segment of Andrew Tate being particularly profound or interesting. I'll go look for it at some point, but I really don't think that he is that like interesting of a guy. I'm wrong though, apparently statistically. So I need to go figure out why he's interesting. And then the fact that like Nick, Christian nationalist, Sneeko, a Muslim, are like, yeah, I'm going to throw away all of my religious principles in order to support a gambling, drug-addicted degenerate who sex traffics, abuses, and rapes women. Why? Why is that necessary? Oh, okay. Play the video, you fruit. Bye. I don't need you. Buzz off. Anyways, this is my show. If you want to go watch Nick, dumbass. Excuse my French. Sorry to the women in chat. Sorry to my mother. Sorry to Ken. Sorry to Jesus, okay? But I'm not, this is my show. You want me to speed up? I'll take longer to talk now. Dickhead. Sorry, chat. Anyways, so 10-7 pro-Palestinian content, that's true. So I guarantee you that all this content was created in earnest, but that doesn't mean that it's not being capitalized on by our geopolitical rivals. And then 2025, the biggest red pill in history. This is the one thing that I actually want to appeal to progressives on. the censorious nature of like 2015 to 2020, where everybody felt like they were walking on eggshells and they couldn't say conservative narratives without risking some level of algorithmic throttling and or bans. This has led to a counter reaction where now these distant ideas are grabbing hold, because effectively what you did, this is kind of like a Jordan Peterson perspective, you didn't strengthen the American mind in order to deal with dissident ideas and recognize BS. You weakened it by letting them play in effectively a bubble, right? So as a result, I would say that this is correlated. The popularity of dissident ideas has to deal with the hug box that we were playing with for the past decade. Real quick, checking in with chat before we move on. QW Gore says, nah, you real for that one? Thanks. Sacred Snow 2 says, Tate isn't insightful. He's a criminal that has capitalized on hatred and anti-establishment sentiment. I believe this is because he can't defend his ideas. Look at the times that Destiny has obliterated him. Well, yeah, but that's what we need to do. We need to find out what's actually attractive about him. I think that Sneeko, and I now understand, based off of consuming his content earlier today, I now understand why Sneeko is attractive, because I find it attractive content as well. He's a young dude who's trying to figure it out, who has weirdly deep conversations mixed with boobs, fast cars, and working out and practicing boxing. That's compelling content. I'm not going to lie. That's actually dope. Like that's fire content. Now, I think he's a moron and he buys into conspiracy theories, but I'm interested. I want to go find the next Sneeko segment that weirdly dips into deep theological questions about reality. I want to, dig into the next Sneeko element that's about, I'm trying to think of what else, like self-improvement or fitness or motivation or whatever. I want to find that content because, frankly, I think there's probably some gold, some gems to strain out of the gutter, right? But we need to go find that stuff, right? And then when it comes to Nick, Razzle Cherry has a criticism. Razzle Cherry says, Nick doesn't worship Andrew Tate. Come on, man. There are a ton of disagreements between them. Nick has done entire shows going after Tate. Sure, they're friendly on Twitter now. That's about it. Well, Razzle, I think you were present for the last segment. He spent like an hour effectively saying that, he spent an hour. We reviewed the content together. I think you remember this. He was saying like, oh, Andrew Tate might be a bad guy. He might be a degenerate, but the truth is that he says the right things and he's politically expedient. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and criticize everyone who's criticizing him. You could say that I'm guilty of the same thing in reference to like Destiny as a creator, right? You could say that I'm guilty of the same hypocrisy. But what I would say is like Destiny is infinitely more harmless from a political perspective than Nick or Andrew Tate. So. All right, sorry. 2 more chats and then we'll get going. Sacred Snow says, in my opinion, the rise of these degenerates, whether it's Trump or Tate or Fuentes, is mainly anti-establishment sentiment. The government needs to move towards maximum transparency. Yeah, I agree. It's not a bad point. All right.
11, JFK, the USS Liberty, aliens, flat Earth. I mean, everything. It also happens to include the truth mixed in there too.
Okay. Razzle, I will accept the fact that Nick does not worship Andrew Tate. I think Sneeko has a more loving relationship with Andrew Tate. I think that Nick, in a previous segment of content, was sweeping for Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, in my opinion, passes a line of criminality that you shouldn't be sweeping for him. Okay? Steven, Destiny, he leaked homemade sex tapes and he allegedly audio recorded consensual sexual liaisons without the consent of the people involved. That's messed up. It's gross. It's degenerate. He shouldn't do it. Andrew Tate beat women, is credibly accused of raping them, and sex trafficked women into Eastern Europe. You can say that Destiny's bad, but if I put his sexual criminal misconduct on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to put Destiny at a 3, and I'm going to put Andrew Tate at a 9. And I'm sorry to any women who are watching this. The only way that Andrew Tate could become worse of a human being compared to beating and raping women is if he actually murdered them and did necrophiliac things with their corpses. In my opinion, that's the only way that Andrew Tate could become worse of a human being.
And the elites don't know how to deal with this because Elon Musk is the private owner of Twitter. There's nothing they could do about it. TikTok is owned in China, and it's massively popular, and it was a powerful tool during the election. Congress tried to ban it, but a zealous billionaire named Jeffrey Yass donated to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has since extended.
Okay. You guys are one guy in me, but that's okay. That's fine. I like engaging with chat anyways. Destiny also has glorified violence against political opponents. Super sugarcoating that. No, I'm not. I don't care. Okay, I'm going to tell you why I don't care. I don't care because back when the BLM riots happened and there was the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, Destiny watched that and he called balls and strikes. And he basically said that Kyle Rittenhouse was in the right and you should be able to defend your private property. And what he said that got him banned off of social media temporarily is he said that, what was it? It was like, if redneck white dipshit militias need to mow down protesters who are setting fire to buildings at 10 p.m. at night, then they have my blessing. That was Destiny's exact quote, right? And he was right. Okay, he was correct. If you are throwing Molotov cocktails into buildings at 10 p.m. and the cops can't do anything to stop you, then local militias should defend those buildings. And if you confront those local militias and it becomes a fight, those local militias should be able to use deadly force. He was 100% correct, and I didn't care. I might lose a couple of you, which is totally fine. It is what it is. If you can't engage with my content because I say something you don't like, it is what it is, okay? But he also said that if you go to a Trump rally and somebody tries to assassinate Trump and then you get accidentally shot, I'm going to make fun of you on social media the next day. And then he said a bunch of like edgy stuff around the firefighter where he was making, frankly, like gross jokes about his death, okay? Here's my thing. If Trump, because he's trying, he's failing, okay? He's failing, but he's trying. If Trump is trying to override the courts, if Trump is trying to not follow due process, if Trump is, he has delegation from Congress in order to deal with tariffs, but let's say that Congress tries to reel him in reference to tariffs and then he ignores them and he implodes the economy the way that he currently is, then, and then also if he backstabs Ukraine, leading to hundreds, if not thousands of deaths that were preventable, and on top of that, he slashes foreign aid that kills hundreds, if not thousands of foreign people, I don't see you, True Zealot or Hearshot or Razzle Cherry. I don't see the tears. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen. I'm going to look at you. I'm going to look into your soul real quick, okay? I don't see you guys reading news stories about East Africans who had their HIV medication cut and then they died within a matter of weeks because they were on antivirals that cost 12 cents a day. I don't see you giving a shit that Trump killed them through slashing their aid. I don't see you caring that Ukrainians are now getting bombed because we're giving preferential treatment to Russia and the Russians are still slaughtering civilians. I don't see you crying about the 19-year-olds in trenches who are getting slaughtered because we're failing to provide intelligence that would allow them to early identify drones that are going to be attacking their lines or artillery strikes that are attacking their lines. I don't see you crying about the Palm Sunday massacre that happened as a result of us not sharing intelligence with Ukraine. I don't see you whining about the hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people that have been killed or will be killed through Trump's presidency, or even to add the economics onto it, the economic implosions that are happening that are absolutely going to hurt and kill people. So don't come to me in my chat with crocodile tears about how Destiny made fun of some dude getting shot a year ago, when if I complain to you about these literally tens of thousands of people that are dying, you're going to be like, well, they're not American, so I don't care. Okay, you don't care about these people? I do. As a result of you not caring about the people that I care about, I don't care about your people. Okay, I don't. Trump is an authoritarian. If he could be king, he would be king. If he could run for a third term, he would run for a third term. If he could get the Republican Party to fillet him in public, that would happen. He would love each individual congressman and senator to walk up and fillet him in front of the American public. So I don't care. Don't come to me with your Destiny's bad tweets. I don't care. Okay? Oh. He's been encouraging political assassination constantly. Oh, are you crying about it? Or are you just saying like he's being unreasonable? If you say he's being unreasonable, he's being unreasonable. He's being crazy. He absolutely is. I'm not going to say he's not being unreasonable. He is being crazy. But don't cry to me about like, oh, people are getting killed because of politics. It's like, no shit. Your guy, which I assume is Trump, is currently killing people because of politics. All right. Anyways, that's enough of that rant. True Zealot says, didn't you just watch Willie Mack's video yesterday where he's looking for people's docs and also wishing he could kill folks? True Zealot, I'm going to ask you a question, okay? I wish I could kill people. All right. This is not appropriate for the Valor Media Network, but I'm going to go ahead and engage with what you're saying. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. I wish I could kill them. Okay. Admiral Gibbs talks smack to me, on a panel. I wish I could, punch him. Right. Does that make me a bad guy? Right. Am I a bad guy because I have homicidal impulses? Or am I a normal human being who's experiencing frustration and anger with people who are attacking me? And as a result, I have anger that I express through hyperbolic and vociferous commentary. Okay. You're acting like if Steven actually had the ability, because I listened to that audio tape, if Steven had the ability to show up on J-Stock's doorsteps and strangle him, or show up to Queenman's doorstep and strangle him, I'm sure he feels that he would want to do that. But if we actually enabled Steven to do that, do you think he would do that? I don't. I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Well, I wouldn't be happy to be proven wrong. I think I could be proven wrong. Maybe Steven is enough of a sociopath that he would actually show up and hurt people. But I don't think that's true. I think he's being hyperbolic. I think he's being edgy. I think he's being crazy. So, True Zealot, do you believe that these are legitimate death threats, or do you think he's being a spurg online? Talking about Nick, cry about Destiny. Yeah, crazy. What about all the women and children raped by coyotes because of Biden's purposeful lack of border policy? You voted for him. Here, Shot, I'm starting to hate you. I know that you're like, we've been together for a long time. I'm starting to hate you. What about the men who are currently stuck in Sukkot permanently because of having the incorrect tattoos, incorrect like clothing? Do you care about them? I guarantee you don't. You can say you do in my chat. I guarantee you don't care about them. And then also about the women raped. Do you want to do anything about it? Because as far as I know, you want to shut down the border, then not let them into the country. But do you want to economically and socially and militarily empower Central American and South American governments against the criminal cartels? Because I do. I'm a neocon. I love interventionism. I love American special forces going overseas in order to train the security forces of other countries. I love soft power. I love when the CIA kills communists. It's my favorite thing in the world. Do you? Or do you just want to let those people be raped in their home countries? Again, it feels like crocodile tears. I'm going to be real. It all feels like crocodile tears. True Zealot, I don't see you caring. Bro, I'm not streaming, nor have I offered any opinion. Chill with that super bad faith. Yo, I'm about to start saying like F slurs, okay? Y'all are being lame is the best that I can say it. Want me in chat complaining about literally everything I want to complain about? You really want me to span that so you don't have to bad faith me? Yo, I'm just going to put it this way, okay? True Zealot, and he, okay. Yeah, you know what? We're good. We're good. We're going to move on. I'm going to let you guys chill out, and I'm going to chill out, and I'm going to move on with the content. But let's just be real. Here, Shot True Zealot, you're kind of fucking annoying. I'll just put it that way. That's the best way that I can say it. Oh. All right. Sorry for cussing, ladies. Sorry for cussing to my mom. Sorry for cussing to Ken. Sorry for cussing to Jesus. I'm just enjoying the stream. Okay, good. Well, continue to enjoy the stream, I guess. We'll get back to it. Content time.
Did TikTok shelf life, the ban has been suspended for another 70 days as of last week. There's nothing they could really do about it. And the results are demonstrable. There was a poll that came out recently. It said that for the first time in history, a majority of Americans don't support Israel. And attitudes are changing all the time. It's been measured in a variety of surveys and polls. They don't know what to do. We're starting, however, to see some of the strategies they're using. And like I said, I think there is now a major counter revolution underway. There is.
Okay, so we're going to have to fact check real quick. So majority in U.S. now disapprove of Israeli action in Gaza. Okay, for me, this is a separate than support for the state of Israel. I guarantee you I could find a Gallup or Pew Research poll that's still going to show like 50 to 70% still support the state of Israel. It's okay to point out that they don't have support for Gaza, but guess what? I'm a relatively I'm a relatively pro-Israel guy, and I don't support what they're doing in Israel, right? Counterpoints support Israel though because he's such. Okay. Bye. Listen, I'm gonna be real, okay? I'm gonna be real. Hearshot and True Zealot gave me enough to engage with that they're at least giving me ideas to contend with. If you walk in here and you're like, I bet he always loves his wife, blah, 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 blah. You get personal with it, you're gone. Okay? We can talk about interesting things. We can talk about Groyper philosophy. We can talk about Nick the Knife Fuentes. We can talk about censorship. We can talk about all that kind of stuff. I'm happy to talk about all of it. However, if you come in here and you're like, oh, Connor's such a good goy, banned. See ya. Come at me with an argument or don't come at all. And so what I was saying before I paused was we did a quick fact check. Majority of Americans still support Israel. They just don't support what Israel is doing in Gaza. Neither do I.
To match the mass red pilling, there's now an effort underway to have a mass blue pilling. They're trying to
see you, Christian.
Counter these narratives. In the old days, they just censor us. In the old days, they just ban us on Twitter. They ban us from PayPal, credit card processors, cancel you, call you a racist. You'd have to do an apology video. They can't do that anymore. Nobody wants to call for censorship outright, although some still are. But they can't successfully get us to get banned. Nobody can cancel anybody anymore. That's over. So even if you can't get people banned, you can't even really cancel properly understood the way you could in the old days either. So now they have to compete. Now they actually have to go into the marketplace of ideas and answer the contention that Israel's powerful, that the Jews are powerful, that, we don't want all these non-white people living in our country. Now they actually have to come up with an answer. And they're not that persuasive. They're not very convincing. Nobody's buying it. Nobody's buying the argument that we should live in India. Nobody's buying the argument that Israel's very weak and is under attack all the time and they have no power at all. No one's buying it. So now they're trying these new strategies. Can't cancel, can't ban, can't even win the argument. Now they're trying another layer of subterfuge. And they're now saying that, well, if they can't beat us in the argument, if they can't ban us, now they're just saying we're not real. They're saying that's not happening. If you think there's a mass red pilling going on, you're wrong. It's actually not happening. That's convenient. You can't ban us, can't cancel us, can't win the argument, don't want to argue with the people that are good at it. So now they're just saying, that's not real. That's not happening. Now they're starting to say that anybody criticizing Israel is a bot. Anybody criticizing Israel is getting fake engagement. They're being paid by Qatar. They're being paid by a foreign country.
Hold up. He was making some points. Yeah, thank you, Grassroots Hegemon. You kind of jumped to where I was getting to, okay? So let's contend with what he's saying. Okay, so you used to be censorious. You used to be able to cancel people. You used to have to do an apology tour. Now you have to compete in the actual marketplace of ideas. I would actually say that I've been fighting for this probably for a decade. So I would say that this is a positive development, even though there's obviously some nefarious after effects, okay? This is fine. I like competing in the marketplace of ideas. I like debating. I like considering things. I love all this stuff. It's one of my favorite things to do, okay? Now, that's a good development. I'm okay with that. We can't pretend that Israel isn't powerful. I don't think anybody who is serious would ever contend that Israel wasn't a technologically complex society capable of engaging in warfare at a level that its peers and neighbors haven't been able to. As a matter of fact, like the entire legend of Israel is that it started in the 1940s. They got attacked by all their neighbors. They pushed out, conquered the territory, got more territory, and as a result, they were able to settle and colonize more land. Then that happened again in the 60s and in the 70s, in the 7-Day War. And so as a result, they just kept like, they would lose temporarily as they were attacked by their neighbors, but then they would turn around and kick the shit out of all their neighbors. Please excuse my profanity to the young ladies at home. Bosses, Ken, my wife, my mother, please forgive me for being profane, but that's the history of it, right? And then also, Israel does have a powerful ally in the United States. As a matter of fact, what I think has been revealed through the historical analysis of the JFK assassination is that Israel wasn't revealed to be the assassin of JFK, but what was revealed was that JFK was questioning the relationship of the United States and Israel, and he was mad. I think it was Ben Gurion, but it could have been somebody else. There was an Israeli prime minister who was dead set on getting nuclear weapons in order to guarantee the survival of his state, and JFK was horribly against it. Whereas LBJ, who had some like familial ties to Israel, he was all for it. He like loves Israel, right? And so that would be the 60s, right? So in the 60s, there was like a normalization and warming of relationships between the United States and Israel. And that was probably after Israel stopped being so socialist. So again, them moving to free markets, based, them becoming more technologically sophisticated, based, them becoming better at what is it, like microchips and logistics, based. So like what's the problem here, right? That Israel is more powerful. Jews are powerful. I think there was cope 5 years, 10 years ago where they're like, oh, they're like Jews in media, like, you know, there's only so many and they're not even that powerful anyways. And it's like, no, there's plenty of rich Jews. There's plenty of Jews in commentary and news and all that kind of stuff. And there is a slight Zionist bent to media coverage of the conflict in Gaza. We can all acknowledge that. But now there is what would you call it? Competing narrative outlets that aren't just dissident right wing. They're also coming from Qatar, in Oman, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Al Jazeera. As we globalize, we're starting to understand alternative perspectives to the Judeo-Christian narrative, right? So we understand these, but that doesn't mean that Israel and Jews don't have the capacity to compete in the marketplace of ideas, right? Or that they should. No one's buying that we should live in India. Grassroots Hegemon points this out in chat. I'm not saying you should live in India, right? There's this thing that dissident right-wing people like to do where they get on Google Maps and then they drop the satellite to any place in India and see if they can spot trash. I don't want to live in a society that's covered in trash, right? However, if there's intelligent, decent, hardworking, tax-paying, kind, family-based Indians, Central Americans, South Americans, Europeans, I would rather take family-based, religiously devout, economically productive, tax-paying immigrants than I would talk to a disaffected, neat, black pill, incel, suicide case on the verge of becoming a mass shooter. Like, no offense, like Groypers, but if you want us, like if you want the American public to like you, you need to be likable. You need to be economically productive. You need to pay your taxes. You need to engage in society. You need to talk to other human beings like you're not a freak. Okay? So maybe start socializing yourself, and I'll prefer you over socialized, decent, hardworking immigrants. Excuse me. Then Israel, more like, is fake, lol. But Hearshot says JFK was arranging for routine inspections of their facilities. Yeah, and apparently him and the prime minister were fighting about whether or not Israel should even have nukes in the months before he was killed. And so Candace Owens and several other dissident right-wing commentators were saying that this was evidence that JFK was killed by Israel, which I think is BS. But anyways. Grassroots Hegemon says, at Razzle Cherry, you can always argue with me. I don't mind it. Yeah, Grassroots Hegemon is a good dude. He loves the fight, okay? Ironside says, as someone who is a normal amount of racist, the terminally online ones disgust me. Exactly. We need a normal amount of racism, okay? Puerto Rican guy. He's blasting music from Puerto Rico. He has a flag in his back window. He throws trash onto the side of the road. You go, hey, buddy, pick up your trash, okay? That's the normal level of bigotry, okay? And you go, dang, you know, you're a little racist in the car. Maybe you say a couple of slurs in your car, right? In the privacy of your own motor vehicle conveyance, okay? That's the normal level of bigotry. But then you see another Puerto Rican guy at the bar, and he's like, yeah, man, I'm coming over from the island. You know, the jobs are bad over there. I just got a job, over here. I'm washing dishes in the back of the house, but I got a little bit of scratch and I'm drinking. Be like, oh, okay, what's your drink? And then you buy drinks and you talk about family and life and all that kind of BS. Be a normal amount of racist, okay? Grassroots Hegemon for $10. We have had a bunch of those people that we didn't have to pay for. They had better jobs. We had more money and a heavier dollar. Yeah, literally, like, no offense. I think I'm going to be pining. I'm going to be pining for, God help me. I'm going to be pining for like the Obama days and the George W. Bush days. Okay. Also, shut up about my personal life. Geez. Razzle Cherry says, people make a country. Indians make a... Whoa. You want to bring them in? You're not understanding what Nick is saying. He's saying that America will be India if they come in mass. Okay, Razzle Cherry, but this is what I need you to understand, okay? I'm going to take what you said on face value. So, Gujarat, okay? Let me find it. Have you noticed that a lot of Indians share similar last names? The reason why is because Gujarat, I'm going to Google it real quick just to make sure I'm not talking totally out of my ass. Does Gujarat, India have a tech sector? Through various incentives. Yes, Gujarat, India has a well-established and growing tech sector, particularly in Medabad and Gandhinagar. Okay. Don't clip that one. Gujarat, India maps. Let me show you this. I'm going to pull it over here so I don't dox myself. I'm going to go to maps. And by the way, like I said, I keep that thing on me. So if you come to my house and you're uninvited, be prepared for a surprise. So Gujarat has the city of Ahmedabad and Surendranagar and Rajkot. And this is Western India. And the narrative that I heard is like 70% of Indian immigrants come from this territory. And the reason why they all come from this territory is because this is actually like a fairly developed part of India that has a vibrant tech sector. And so these are the people who can afford visas. These are the people who can afford green cards. These are the people who can afford to wait in line. They can apply for their kids to become immigrants. They can wait 10 or 20 years. Their kids can be working in the tech sector. And then they come to the United States and they work in IT, or they own a business, or they buy a gas station, or they buy, an electronics store or a cell phone store or something like that. And they run a small business in the United States because the United States does have, let's face it, decent infrastructure, decent living conditions, decent houses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not taking, is like Delhi. We're not taking the untouchables from New Delhi and then bringing them in by the tens of thousands. We're taking in the tech bros and the educated families from Gujarat. So when you say, oh, I'm worried that we're going to be flooded with the lower caste systems of India, you're just wrong. You're just like ignorant. You just don't like Indian people because they, their food smells weird and they talk weird. And sometimes they can be like rude or abrasive. Okay. Whereas what you should be concerned with, and what I'm concerned with, is Central and South America, because these people can just walk here. But the reason why they're walking here is because these places, no offense to Central and South Americans, oftentimes these places suck. They're filled with violence. They're filled with drug violence. There's not very many economic opportunities. There's not very many educational opportunities. And so they know if they come to the United States, not only will they likely be able to find gainful employment, but they also know that their children will go to decent schools, have access to secondary education. They'll be able to climb up the socioeconomic ladder. They'll have better lives. And so if you want Indians to not come here, I think you're kind of being a moron, because we're not recruiting the lower level people from India. We're recruiting the top tier cream of the crop folks from India. And then if you're worried about Central and South American, mass immigration into the United States, you know what you need to do? You need to stop being an antisocial, I'm just going to say it, apologies to all the women, apologies to my mother, apology to Ken. You need to stop being an antisocial retard. You need to socialize. You need to get a job. You need to get an education. You need to get married. You need to have more than 2 children in order to increase the birth rate. And then we need to internationally go into Central and South America and make these places better to live. Okay? That's what we need to do if you are so concerned with the United States becoming third world. So stop listening to Black Pill. Stop listening to race realist psychos. Focus on improving yourself, getting married, having 3 kids, and then also focus on becoming a member of government or supporting a government that actually improves Central and South America, so we don't have all the pull factors into the United States. End of rant. Remarks ended. All right. Let me catch up with chat real quick, just because I went on a 5-minute rant. My apologies. K Soko says, I'm usually laughing about the giant Puerto Rican flag hanging out of the sunroof of Latin dance music blast. Yeah, relatively speaking, although I would like it if they shut it off at 11 p.m. so I could go to sleep at a reasonable time. I do have Mexican neighbors. They're very nice. They do shut off their music after 10 p.m. They do play it during the day on weekends, which is kind of annoying. But guess what? I wake up, I go, you know what? That's kind of annoying. And then I keep moving on with my day. That's my anti-Mexican racism in my neighborhood. Is there's a Mexican guy who washes his truck while listening to music and grilling in his front yard. And I go, that's kind of annoying. And then I keep going with my day. Right? Grassroots Chechamon says, what % of Indians do you think are actually guiding American politics? Ballpark is good enough for the chat. 7%. Okay. I don't know. But what racism created the giant flooding island of trash in the middle of the Pacific, also called Australia? Brutal. English stuff. JF would be a good guest to talk about replacement theory. I mean, I've already talked to JF about it. I think I have an old video. We did talk about Russia, Ukraine, though, not great replacement theory. I could talk to him, but again, like, who is this? Was that Razzle Cherry who said that? Probably make a country, Indians, Gujarat. Hold on. Make a country. JF. Hearshot says JF. Okay. The fact that you know JF Gary Epi is scary already. JF Gary Epi is a French Canadian who is a libertarian, who is a eugenicist. I don't have problems with eugenics necessarily. I think he takes it too far, but it is what it is. Who married a actually mentally disabled woman in order to have children with her because he was so obsessed with making children. And then I'm not saying he killed his wife. There's video of him dropping off his wife at a gas station. But his mentally disabled wife, who was previously not incarcerated by the state, but had like a protection order from the state, he let her loose at a gas station, and she's either wandering around in the wilds of Canada surviving off of homeless food, or she's dead. Either dead from exposure or JF killed her. Okay? So why would I go to, and I'm not saying JF is unintelligent. JF is wildly intelligent. But why would I talk to JF about the future of the world when he's a wildly intelligent sociopath who married a mentally disabled woman and then likely killed her, had children with her, and then abandoned her at a gas station and either murdered her or let her die from exposure? Why would that be somebody that I should take seriously as a public intellectual? Why is that a statement that you're making? That's crazy pants. Listen to me. I'm married. I have kids. I didn't murder my wife. This actually should be like a really easy contest about who you should listen to more about life. The guy who murdered his wife and had kids with somebody who's actually mentally disabled, or somebody who married like a decent human being and has a compatible relationship, has 2 kids, and isn't suspected of murder. Should be easy, but sometimes it's not. Focus Lady says, it's really difficult to be abnormally racist towards cultures that make food that is both equally delicious and nutritious. I mean, listen, Focus Lady, I'm not going to lie. I have my racist moments, all right? But I try to be like normal levels of racist, right? Razzle Cherry says, I'm honestly not very affected by it. I don't know why you have to call me a tard. All right, I'm sorry, Razzle. My apologies. I don't think it's our responsibility to lift up people who are not American. Okay, but Razzle, that's exactly what I'm saying, all right? I'll try to be more polite. You're right. I'm flying off the handle because I'm not just talking to you. I'm also talking to groypers in general. So my apologies for being rude. However, if you don't want waves of mass immigration to come up from Central America or South America, guess what? Central America and South America have to be part of your political focus. Sorry for being rude. As far as I know, she's a free woman of the woods. Yeah. Well, QC John says, you're racist against Indians because they are brown. I'm racist against Indians because they call me saying they need my credit card number because it was hacked. We are not the same. That's an okay reason, okay? JF probably did kill her. I have no idea, right? I have no idea. So how is he intelligent? He was working in a research lab. He actually has like a PhD. He got a grant from Jeffrey Epstein to start his YouTube channel. He's an overall like a very intelligent guy. He's like a geneticist. He actually studies all that stuff. Yeah, you guys are agreeing with me. Focus Lady says, Gary Epi friended with me on Twitter because I posted about scientific research. When I found out what he was about, I blocked him. Wow, small world. Small world. That's amazing. All right. Anyways. We got my apologies. We got 1 guide. We got multi-guide. We got 3 guide, okay? Razzle, I don't know if you're still around, but I'm calling for I'm sorry for calling you retarded. Or we impose a temporary immigration moratorium like a serious country. Yeah, but okay, Razzle, that's fine. All right. So boom, let's do this. Let's address this as a policy thing. Okay, so we impose a immigration moratorium. We now have food rotting in the fields. It's going to cause inflation because we don't have as much food as we did because we deported all the Central American migrant immigrant labor. Construction isn't being done, and the construction that is being done way more expensively. So that's going on. So we've effectively put like a boulder around our economy. And then on top of that, the birth rate doesn't increase because we are using contraceptions and we enjoy our materialistically high quality of life. Now what? Okay. Food's more expensive. Construction is more expensive. Central America and South America are still not doing great. The United States does not have a replacement birth rate. Now what? Right? A temporary immigration moratorium is like slapping a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. I don't know what you're achieving. Anyways, sorry. Content.
They're getting paid by Iran. That's the new line they're going with. They say that if you're out there pushing these, again, a truly alternative narrative, a true alternative, that's an important word. In other words, we're not looking at the mainstream and saying, yeah, we agree with the mainstream, just a couple criticisms. No, we're saying we want a complete alternative. We want something completely different. We want to deconstruct it and have different fundamentals and construct something new. Important distinction. So they say everybody that is pushing this true alternative right, alternative thinking, they're just fake. That's just fake engagement, foreign money, it's botted, it's not real. And simultaneously, they're also promoting other people that are pushing the mainstream narrative and saying, you know, I don't like the bots and the Qataris, and I don't like these controlled opposition. They're from the feds. They're from the global.
The accusation of Nick Fuentes being a Fed is he encouraged his audience to participate in January 6th. However, he was not caught inside the building. He received hundreds of thousands of dollars from foreign donors. And so as a result, there are people with a similar history to him who did go to jail during January 6th, but he didn't. And so the accusation is that he received leniency from the feds in order to be controlled opposition of the dissident right. Now, I'm not sure I necessarily believe that. He says some stuff that's kind of feddy every now and then, but he also could just be schizo posting. I have no idea, right? Razzle says, other policy would supplement the immigration moratorium. Of course, we would have to flip the entire chessboard in the United States to get back on track. Well, that's kind of my point, man. So if you can't flip the chessboard, then we're kind of just talking about like idealist nonsense, like things that have nothing to do with reality. On top of that, like, what's the flipping the chessboard, right? So if we were to follow Nick, we would become like a patriarchal, and I'm not saying these things to be negative, I'm saying these things to be descriptive. We would flip to a patriarchal, traditionalist, Christian nationalist society that was race realist. So we would have segregation return. Most people don't want that. We would have authoritative marriages that don't have divorce. Women don't want that. We would have gays and trans people going back in the closet. They don't want that. We would have black folk and Hispanics cut off from some of the most prestigious organizations in the country. They don't want that. And neither do liberals or Democrats or progressives or moderate conservatives. So what do you actually want to do, right? What do you actually want? What do you want that could happen?
They're trying to divide us. They're saying anyone pushing the alternative is fake. We have someone from our camp, someone that's pushing the mainstream. That person's all right. That person's okay. To illustrate this, I'll give you some examples that I saw just today. Few examples. So in the first place, I saw the interview with Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson. And I like Alex.
Grassroots, I see your monstrous donation and I appreciate it, but I literally just took a bite of trail mix. So I'm going to let Nick talk for a second while I chew my trail mix. And then I'm going to get to your monstrous donation.
Jones, I've known him a long time. And Alex Jones has always subtly implied this about me, which is really ironic. For as long as I've known Alex Jones, he's never trusted me, and he's always implied or insinuated that I'm controlled opposition. And his staff has done the same thing. He used to have a girl working for him named Millie Weaver. She's totally crazy. She used to do the same thing. And especially after I met Alex Jones with Kanye West, formerly known as, a few years ago, and we did a show with him. Me and Ye did a show with Alex Jones where Ye said he loved Hitler. Alex Jones thinks that that was an attack on his show.
Okay. Grassroots Hegemon with the monstrous $100 donation said, being a eugenicist can potentially be fine, one loser at a time. Being a communist can be fine, one loser at a time. Being a fascist can be survivable, one loser at a time. What I'd prefer is not to be surrounded by people who aren't losers. I mean, that's the main thing, right? So I would say that I'm not a eugenicist in we should, what do you call it? I'm thinking of the word vasectomy, but there's another word that covers vasectomy and tubal ligation, right? And so it's not castration. Somebody help me. But anyways, somebody help me in chat for whatever the term is where you basically make people sterilize. Sterilize. That's what I was looking for. So I'm not for the mandatory sterilization of whatever you would call them, undesirables in society, right? I'm not for that. However, I would be for the voluntary sterilization of undesirables in society. If there were people who said like, oh yeah, I have this horrible genetic disorder, there's like a 60% chance that I'm going to give it to my kids. As a result, I'm worried that I'm going to. I'm not interested in having children as a result. Therefore, if you paid for my vasectomy or paid for my tubal ligation, I would do that. I would 100% be okay with that. Same thing with, let's say that we had like a black pill cult All the Groypers decided that society was no longer worth defending or supporting. And so as a result, they all decided that they were going to get vasectomies in order to not, be a part of society. Okay. Free vasectomies for you as well. I pretty much would provide free vasectomies and tubal ligation to anyone who thought that it was a good idea, because they're effectively eliminating themselves from the gene pool. Also, from a eugenicist perspective, I think that we should be supporting mothers and supporting families during pregnancy and during early childhood in order to maximize their nutrition. So we maximize the environmental factors that cause high IQ, right? So effectively, if you're pregnant, I don't care if you're Black, Hispanic, white, Asian, whatever, you should effectively get a temporary assistance for needy families supplement that is just berries and fruit and antioxidants and all that kind of stuff. You should be able to walk in as a pregnant woman and we'll just give you unlimited produce, not just for the 9 months that you're pregnant, but also for the first 2 years of your child's life, because there's correlative indications that childhood nutrition can plus or minus 5 to 10 IQ points in either direction. And so as a result, 5 to 10 IQ points can be quite a bit. So if we're talking about young Black families being able to get excellent nutrition while they're pregnant and get excellent nutrition for their babies when they're very young, that could literally as a matter of fact, let's just make sure that I'm not full of baloney real quick. How much does nutrition affect IQ? Nutrition effect on IQ. Iodine deficiency can cause a decrease of 12 IQ points. Now, the good news is that iodine and iron are found in meat and salt. So, that's already a substantive part about the vitamin. That's already a substantive part of the American diet. However, the point is that we could literally increase IQ by 5 to 10 points just based off of increases in nutrition. That's what I would do, right? So that's a eugenicist, because eugenicist means good origin. That's a eugenicist perspective. But obviously there's a massive difference between, I don't know, the mass slaughter of industrial, on an industrial scale of social undesirables. There's a huge difference between that and allowing for voluntary sterilization and trying to support pregnancies to be maximally healthy, right? Obviously there's a huge difference. Sacred's Now 2 says, I think what Connor is getting at, it doesn't deal with the underlying cause. Yeah, that's actually exactly what I'm poking at. Razzle Cherry says, that's too general of a question. The country is not truly right-wing, as you rightly point out. I'll leave it for Nick to figure out. Well, dude, but that's I'm assuming you're a young man and you watch Nick Fuentes for entertainment purposes, and you're kind enough to show up into this stream to watch for entertainment purposes and hopefully have some of your perspectives challenged. You can watch this guy for another decade, and I don't care. If he's still entertaining a decade from now and you're watching him, I don't care. But he's obviously trying to sell you on something. He's trying to sell you on being a Christian nationalist. He's trying to sell you on being black pill or red pill. He's trying to sell you on finding a debt-free tattoo virgin who's 19 years old. And so as a result of trying to convince you of all of these ideas, you might be hostile to people who don't agree with these ideas. And you might be hostile to women in your life who could be your potential mate, who might be your partner, who might be your wife, who might give you children. And you'll say, no, thank you. I want a debt-free virgin with no tattoos. And then you'll miss out on your life, right? Regardless of whether or not it's you or someone else, that's my concern. My concern is that you will miss out on your life by listening to morons. Thank you, Kesoko. Sabian Green says, but why not? The last time we did eugenics, we barely knew anything. Think about how much better we could do it this time. Nice. Nice, Sapien Green. Nice. That was crazy. The weird thing is about the more questionable aspects of eugenics is that the most of the modern people who are vocal about it would be the targets of it. I mean, that's true. I'm not okay with the state deciding who gets to procreate. I do not trust any government. Agreed. Iodine is only found in table salt. Agreed. Not all salt. True. When I think about how smart I'd be if my mother had better produce access, I become confused and lose my train of thought. Chat's being wild. Chat's being wild. Pachydermis absurdus says, oh, wait, hold on. I just read that. I just laughed at it because it was so good. Yeah. Grassroots Hegemon says, this country is incredibly right-wing. It's just not toddler Hitler. Yeah, I agree. IQ is almost entirely racial, of course. There are other factors, but it's not even close. I'm talking about averages. I know there are Black, Asian, white, Hispanic geniuses. Yeah, Razzle. And I'm not going to do the thing where I argue that, like, oh, there's this Hispanic guy and he's a genius. But I'm not going to do that to you, okay? I have a more coherent argument. I'm going to show you this real quick. So there's something called the Flynn effect. I'll be very brief because I've been yapping for a while, but I'm getting... I think once I hit like 4 or 5 hours, I start to get delirious. We've been live for 4 hours, so I'm starting to get delulu, as they would say. So there's something called the Flynn effect. And the Flynn effect is a average raise in IQ by 15 points. So the Flynn effect is general phenomena in which the average intelligence quotient scores have been found to increase across time in developed countries at a startling consistent rate of approximately 0.33 points per year, or 0.33 points per decade, or 3.3 points per decade. Okay. So we're seeing an average IQ increase of 3.3 points per decade. And as a matter of fact, over the past century, we've seen a 15-point increase in the highest like echelons of population, right? 1932 to 1997, we effectively got from 100 to 120. We went up 20 points in 70 years. Now, the Flynn, the psychologist who discovered this thing, he stated that there is an upper ceiling to this because effectively it's environment. It's having less threats. It's having better nutrition. It's being in a stable society. It's having more industrial work. It's considering hypotheticals, right? And so as a result, this 20-point increase has happened. But guess what? If we had a 20-point increase in IQ over the past 100 years, that means that it's not racial. It's not genetic. It's correlated 100%. It's correlated with genetics. I'm not saying that it isn't genetic. Of course it's genetic, but there's a 20-point environmental gap that we can demonstrate just within the past, like within the 70 years from 1932 to 1997. And then not just that, but apparently this is a continuing effect according to the summary. According to the summary, we get 3 points smarter every decade. So if you're being a race realist, and you're saying that the average IQ, let's take a look at it. Black average IQ, now, I guess. So sub-Saharan Black specifically have a IQ of 68, but that is pretty stinking low. What's American Black folk? American or African American. That would be the best way to do it. African American average IQ. Why do Black people have an average IQ of 85? Let's just use Cora for a second. So if it's 85, in America, it's 85, okay? So, and worldwide, it's 68, all right? So we already know that we can increase it by 15 points or 20 points through environmental factors. So you could get Black folk in sub-Saharan Africa, just off of environmental factors alone, up to 88. And you could get Black Americans in the United States up to 105. And if you wanted to put this on a decade scale where we're assuming that we still increase average IQ by 3 points every decade, this would be 3.3 in order to get 85 up to 100. That would be 15, right? So it would be 50 years, right? So it's 2025 right now. By 2075, you could get, and by the way, like, I'm not trying to be insulting specifically to African Americans. I'm trying to like effectively debunk or at least make an environmental case for supporting like increases in education and increases in thinking and hypotheticals and increases in nutrition and increases in environmental stuff, right? If this is true, if the Flynn effect is true, then we could make average African American IQ the same as the norm population now. Why wouldn't you want that? Why would you just constantly complain about how all other races are evil or not like us when, one, it's demonstrably untrue, and two, we could do something about it? That's actually, I'm not going to lie, this isn't you. I'm not trying to yell at you specifically, but I think it's infinitely easier to improve America than it is to do an immigration moratorium and then we'll just have more white babies. I think my solution is infinitely more likely than yours. Razzle Cherry says, Groypers are people. We follow the example of Nick, but we're also making decisions in the real world. This is now ideal for sure, but we make do. The shooters and freaks are Bappists. Is that a Bronze Age pervert? I wouldn't be surprised. Well, thank you for sharing that nuance. I appreciate it. Kesoko says, education that increases seems to coincide with improvements, education in the education systems. Education will save us all. I mean, I don't want to put all my eggs in the education basket, but it's obviously a basket that we should be heavily investing in. Find education, expand access to it, and look at that 15-point baseline increase. Yes. Okay, Bronze Age pervert is a freak. Okay, good. It's good to learn things about the dissident right wing as we engage with it. Okay. Anyways, I've been yapping for long enough. Let's let Nick yap. Okay. My apologies for going on a tangent, but it is important. Sapien Green, sorry, before we get back into it, when taking a country's average IQ, you also have to consider that especially a country like the US has attracted intelligent people, which one would assume would increase average IQ. Agreed.
We were deployed there to bring down InfoWars. We were sent there to take him down by saying that we don't hate Hitler, that Hitler did a lot of good things. And I've been on his show since then, and it's always been a little subtext. There's always been a little subtext, which is, you were sent here by the SPLC. You were deployed here to take down my show. He's insinuated that privately. He's insinuated it publicly, which is ironic because everyone calls him an Israeli shill. And he doesn't talk so much about Israel these days. Sometimes he does, but not often. And he went on the show with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson has said the same about me in the past as well. He collaborated with Max Blumenthal on a hit piece about me for the Gray Zone, which says that I was deployed to take down his buddy Joe Kent. And we've talked about that on the show before. We could talk about it tonight also. But they do a show together, Alex Jones and Tucker, and yeah, it's a normal show. Alex doesn't seem as happy as he used to be. He's not joking around as much as he used to. It's a very serious show, unusually serious. And they do a little clip about an hour and 40 minutes into the show. And Tucker says that he knows for a fact that there are big actors online pushing racial hatred. He said, and it's not real, it's fake. He said, it's like Charlottesville, it's fake. It's like Patriot Front, it's fake. They're feds, or they're working with the enemy. They're working with the enemy to make the right look bad, or they're working with the enemy for some nebulous five-dimensional chess strategic goal. Tucker says he knows for a fact big actors pushing ethnic hatred, just like Charlottesville, they're not real. Alex Jones says, yup, I've seen the documents. I know what you're talking about. But they won't name who that is. They won't name who's the big actor. And let's see, Tucker has done a show with Candace Owens. He's done a show with, some of the Christian nationalists like Isker and other people. Who are the let's think, who are the big actors at Charlottesville pushing hatred that are accused of being inorganic? I wonder who that could be. Someone that they won't name either, by the way. They won't name the person. They won't give the evidence. They know for a fact they've seen the documents. Oh, well, if there's documents, then let's blow the lid wide open. If we've seen the documents, well, don't you have an obligation to share them? I've seen the Where are the documents? Show them, please. Please, this is my call for full transparency. Give us the documents. Name the names. If I'm the name, say my name. If I'm on the documents, let's see the documents. I got nothing to hide. Wouldn't that be irresponsible to allow astroturfed, artificial hate mongers to continue to poison the well for public discussion if you know for a fact you have evidence, you have documents? that prove they're not who they say they are? Let's see them. But it's really interesting. We neither get the name nor the evidence. We get a vague insinuation that some people somewhere are not being sincere. They don't believe the things they're saying. And we also don't even really get who's backing them or why. The enemy is backing them. Alex makes some vague reference to Hegelian dialectic. He always says that.
Okay, so hold up. Razzle Cherry says, speaking of InfoWars, this Friday, Nick will be on Alex Jones, W content, also the Hodge twins. I hate the Hodge twins, but maybe we should react to them because I could, engage in an hour of hate. That would be fun. And then also I haven't engaged with a lot of InfoWars content, and I actually asked one of my relatives who is not a groiper, but he's one of these disaffected young men. He's in his late 20s. He's in his late 20s. He isn't married. He's working a job that's stable. He actually has like a job that has quite a lot of purpose in it. But I asked him who he consumes, and he said Alex Jones. And I was like, man, I don't even know if I could do that. That's like too crazy for me. And he's like, no, it's actually pretty funny. It's actually pretty entertaining. So that might be something that I want to do. And then, K-Soko, I will answer your question momentarily, but I do kind of want to break this down real quick before I engage with chat. So Kanye, Nick's friend and former very popular hip hop artist, went on to Alex Jones and started talking about how they don't hate Hitler and Hitler did a lot of good things. I would understand if other right-wing figures are like, that's a bad look. Most Americans hate Hitler. Most Americans understand that he was responsible for mass slaughter. Most Americans understand that, like, in general, he caused World War II, which was one of the most destructive world events in all of history. So even if they only know that on a subconscious level, you sweeping for him effectively makes it so you are politically toxic. You're radioactive. You're a piece of garbage. That's how I feel about Candace Owens, by the way. I think she's a piece of garbage who plays with fire all the time for attention. Then, like Charlottesville and Patriot Front is all fake. And Nick basically says, well, show us why it's fake. And I'll tell you why they actually say that Charlottesville and Patriot Front is fake, okay? They say Charlottesville is fake because if they say that it's not the real right that did that, they don't have to take responsibility for the homicide that happened in Charlottesville. If they say that Patriot Front is all feds, they're all federal employees ginning up the numbers of Patriot Front so there aren't masked racist European supremacist ethno-nationalists in the United States, well, then that's kind of like an assuaging narrative of the rest of the right wing who'd be like, well, I don't have to say that there's actual racists in my movement because all the racists are federal operatives anyways. So it gives plausible deniability to the far right to say like, oh, we're not like them. We don't have to apologize for them. We don't have to defend them. We don't have to make excuses for them because they're not even really a part of our organization anyway. So it's a really like, I don't think that they're trying to call Nick Fuentes fake or a fed, although I do understand why he thinks that. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to give their audience plausible deniability for why they don't have to accept that parts of their movement are legitimately ethno-religiously and racially hateful. That's why they say that, right? And the reason why they're not presenting evidence is either because it would be destructive for a whole bunch of people to be exposed in that way, or because it allows them to appeal to conspiracy where they don't have to provide evidence. Their audience doesn't demand evidence. The insinuation is enough, right? Kate Soko says, Connor, I was meaning to ask, what kind of branding have you done for the new Rhino brand? You're expanding. I was curious what you're doing on that front. I'm probably not. To be honest, we're probably just sticking with Counterpoints. Just being real, kind of abandoned that. It's not that I don't like it. I do like it a lot. I just don't know. I feel like Counterpoints is more centrist, I guess. And so as a result, we can welcome people from all political persuasions, whereas Rhino is obviously exclusively going after never Trump Republicans. Maybe that would be advantageous in a way. But, dude, I've been Counterpoints online for 5 years. I've been the guy who debated with Lauren Southern, who embarrassed that Native American guy. That was the way. Can I have this refill, please? That's kind of like, if people know me from the Lauren Southern debate, that's how they know me, right? They know Counterpoints. Oh, he's that guy who destroyed the serfs and his Native American friend, right? You guys remember when K-Soko again, you guys remember when Kanye before the Kardashians? Man, I miss those days. Yeah, I miss his fire music. He's made a lot of bangers over the years. Razzle Cherry says, Candace Owens snubs Nick and makes us look stupid. She's talking about how landing on the moon was fake and how NASA is satanic, totally unhinged. Yeah, Candace Owens is legitimately a lunatic. I've reviewed some of her content. She's a psycho, for sure. Sapien Green says, that Native American guy embarrassed himself. You didn't play that big of a role. Well, thanks, Sapien. Listen, I was at least smart enough to let him jump on his own rakes and break his own nose in public, right? Jay dropped off musically after Donda 2. Probably. Are you okay?
Has he read Hegel? I'm not sure. He likes to say that. I've never heard him actually elaborate on that outside of just name dropping that, maybe to sound smart or something, to sound cool. But Hegel doesn't talk about that at all, actually. When Hegel talks about dialectic, it has nothing to do with what Alex is saying. In any case, so they say the reason that people apparently are being astroturfed to push hate is, I'm not really even sure. There's not actually an end goal mentioned. We don't even know who's doing it or how it's being done or anything like this. But I thought it was very interesting that they pushed that idea today. So Tucker says people are pushing hatred, but they're not real. And it's some vague reference to me. The same day, Tim Pool meets with Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay, Tim Pool from Timcast Live, Timcast IRL. You all know him. Tim Pool has a closed-door meeting with Dave Rubin and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, where during the meeting, Tim Pool raises the point that all the anti-Israel content is fake. It's all being astroturfed. Anyone criticizing Israel is being astroturfed, botted. It's all fake. This was reported in the press, and Tim Pool addressed it on his show. And the first thing Tim Pool said is, this should have never gotten out. He said the meeting has rules, and the rules are no one can say who was at the meeting and no one can say what was said, which is really strange. He seems almost mad that it got out. He seems flustered and angry that it was revealed that he and Dave Rubin met with Netanyahu and discussed whether Qatar was influencing Twitter to be anti-Semitic or not. And he addresses this on his show and says, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Fuentes was Mossad. I'm working for Israel, apparently, because he says when Nick Fuentes goes online and accuses people of working for Israel, he says that makes people think you're crazy and it makes you pro-Israel. Really? So let's say, for the sake of argument, let's just say as a crazy hypothetical.
This is actually awesome. I love this. Grassroots, you are being too kind today. Thank you kindly. Pace yourself, sir, okay? You know, a little bit of love every day is better than all of your love on one day, okay? I'm a very timid soul. I need a long-term thing, not a fling, okay? So hold on, let me address this real quick before I check out chat in the comments. So Tim meets with Dave Rubin and Bibi Netanyahu. I do find that strange. But I think you need to know that alternative media it's not going away, right? Even if I go away, let's say in 6 months, I'm not streaming anymore. I'm just doing editing work for other people. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That doesn't mean that somebody isn't taking my place. That doesn't mean that liberals, progressive, never Trumpers or whatever, they're not going to try to continue to create never Trump, anti-MAGA pieces, because effectively, like, this is the new battlefield, right? So even if I'm not its strongest warrior, this is where the soul of America will be fought for, okay? So Tim meets with, and I was on Tim's show a few weeks ago, Tim meets with Dave Rubin and Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi is literally the leader of one of the most controversial states at the center of the most controversial conflict on the planet right now. And Tim allegedly says that anti-Israel sentiment is astroturfed and that it's, you know, Qatar or Oman or the UAE who's botting and fake. Now, that statement, I'm not saying that Tim is saying that Nick is fake, okay? Although I guess he says it a little bit later. But what I get suspicious of is when there's anti-Israel statements that have 100,000 likes and 12 comments, okay? The reason why I suspect botting in those kind of things is because if you have 12 comments, typically if you have something that's popping off, I've had comments that have broken 5,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. I think I had one that was like 175,000. I think it was like in reference to like the Minecraft movie or something. It was a huge post. It blew up way outside of my audience. I was saying that the Minecraft movie is for kids and not for adults, and I got blown up. Well, not only did I have like 175,000 likes and like millions of views because tons of people were quote tweeting me, but I also had like hundreds of comments, both passionate pro my position and passionate against. And so you would think that with 100,000 likes, more than 12 people would comment on that Twitter post, right? So that's where I think the botting against Israel is real. The thing that Timp Israel, if you will, where the Chatham House rules, I think Tim Pool literally misunderstood it. Chatham House rules I was introduced to for my meeting in DC, and Chatham House rules effectively says that you can discuss what was discussed in the meeting, but you can't say who said it. So Tim Pool, because I heard him say that it was supposed to be Chatham House rules, him saying that it was never supposed to be known that he was meeting with Bibi Netanyahu and Dave Rubin, that's inaccurate. The only thing that was agreed was that you would not specifically assign what was said to which party. That way people can speak their mind in confidence, because meeting with people is not bad, but you can get in trouble for the spicy things you say. So it's not that big of a deal, right? I think Tim's being a little bit of a wuss in reference to that. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick was Mossad. I think this is cope. Nick Fuentes is probably the biggest lightning rod of anti-Semitic sentiment in the United States. He's one of the biggest ones, besides what, like Andrew Tate, Sneeko, maybe Muhammad Hijab, or a few other like Muslim creators. He's probably one of the biggest ones. And so as a result, why would Mossad prop him up in order to be the lightning rod? Because to be honest, Nick has a coherent argument. He appeals to a disaffected tens of thousands of Christian nationalists. He appeals to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of young men. I don't see the operation, basically. So I'm actually with Nick in this regard, that I don't understand how what he's doing would be beneficial to the state of Israel or Mossad. Except for maybe hanging out with Ye and then making such a fool of himself, so to speak, that he's no longer taken seriously. That's the only thing that I could possibly think of. Bud123 says, may the memes be with you, and also with you. Grocery Treasure Bond, another $5. Why it's good to suck Ooh, getting a little spicy here. And Nick can promise you that he's only done it twice. Yeah, in reference to Stalin, right? He was a big Stalin simp for a while. He read a few biographies about Stalin, and he was like, yeah, this is the guy. Razzle Cherry says, okay, so here's my theory. Twitter has botting built into the system. I've seen the far right, far left, and the center botted like crazy. There's botting going on. That's not controversial. Yeah, I agree. I just wouldn't be surprised if they were paid for, if the bots were paid for by different groups. I agree. Yeah, Jack-o'-lantern. It was funny seeing that tweet being brought up in the wild. I was on a stand-up comedy show. There's a show, Minecraft movie, Twitter, what was it? Stand-up comedy show with like Tommy something. Oh, I need to find it. I'm not going to waste your guys' time. But effectively, there's a female stand-up comedian who's really popular, and she's hosting a show, and she used my tweet in a segment. Kind of funny.
What if Nick Fuentes called Tim Pool an agent of Israel? That is indicative of me being fake and controlled, because to make a wild allegation like that, for me to make a fake accusation like that, something so crazy, who could ever believe it? It would actually make anyone who heard it pro-Israel for hearing that.
Thanks, buddy.
Would it make someone pro-Israel to know that he left a meeting with Netanyahu and Dave Rubin on Tuesday, that he had a meltdown because people found out about it? And inside the meeting, they talked about the crisis of everyone criticizing Israel on Twitter. If you found out that, would it sound so crazy? Would that make someone more pro-Israel or less pro-Israel? Would that make someone more trusting of those that are pro-Israel or more distrusting and skeptical of those that are pro-Israel after having heard that? Wait a second. You're telling me that Tim Pool not only got millions of dollars from Russia, him and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin were not only all getting paid a conspicuously large amount of money from Russia through Tenet Media, but also they're secretly meeting with Bibi Netanyahu to discuss how to fight anti-Semitism? Does that make someone more trusting or less trusting of the options that we're getting? Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson and Charlie Kirk and, I mean, you name them.
Oh.
That happened. And then on the same day, Joe Rogan hosted debate between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray. Douglas Murray is a super pro-Israel guy. Dave Smith is a Jewish libertarian. And Douglas Murray excoriates Joe Rogan and Dave Smith and says, how dare you criticize Israel without being an expert? How dare you criticize the war in Ukraine? You're not a historian.
No.
And criticizes other people that weren't even in the room. Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. And Dave Smith says, hey, man, I'm not a hater. As a matter of fact, I'm not a racist. And I hate Hitler, he says. Hitler was one of the most evil people. I'm a German Jew, and I hate Hitler, and I hate all the racial stuff, and we need to push back against the racial stuff, but we can criticize that my money's going to Israel. That's a little weird. That's kind of a weird, it almost seems like a fake debate.
No. Now he's going crazy. With it. That's bananas. Grassroots Hegemon says, and as a wage cager, if a few grand goes missing, I'm not going homeless over it. Well, your support is very much appreciated. Obviously, thank you kindly to Grassroots Hegemon, who has been more than generous to the channel. Honestly, parasocial love to you and yours deeply. But also Sapien Green, who has given a substantive amount of money to the channel and is a kind fella. And also Christian Vlaris, who is a kind fella and who just got a big boy job, and he is kind enough to give us some of his big boy earnings. So seriously, thank you guys. Your support for the channel, it means the world to me. Even just showing up in chat and liking the stream and all that kind of stuff, it does mean a lot. And then the donations obviously help. But Jack-o'-lantern says, Qatar absolutely astroturfs anti-Israel sentiment. They just put their money into universities. Agreed. And then Jonah Boy says, I saw you mention in a meme on the Leftoid 40K subreddit. They didn't appreciate your taste on female custodies. I had 3 or 4 people come over to my Warhammer channel and comment on my custodies video saying, hey, this video / your takes are popping off on Reddit and people hate this video, but I love it. But that's all that happened. I saw a slight increase in the views. And then I got 3 comments from people who liked the video and knew that it was popping off on Reddit. I didn't get any hate comments. I really didn't. Or if the hate comments were so bad that they got auto-modded. I haven't seen any hate comments. So whatever. If my stuff pops off on Reddit, God bless them. So with Nick, he's going too far right here, okay? Dave Smith, you can call Dave Smith a moron if you want, but he's responsive on Twitter. He legitimately responds to a healthy chunk of people that he doesn't need to. I think that he earnestly believes what he believes. It's just that his opinions suck, right? And I think Douglas Murray, same thing. You can like him or hate him, but I think that his position is only capable of being held if he had genuine contempt for what he basically did. Is he said that Joe Rogan and Dave Smith are useful idiots for dissident right-wing actors who are trying to propagate an anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli message, and they are too dumb and cucked in order to challenge them in a conversation or a debate. And so if they're going to talk to schizophrenic, dissident right-wing conspiracy theorists, then you also need to have experts on. So categorizing that as how dare you criticize Israel is not what Douglas said. What Douglas said is, if you're going to talk to Ian Carroll and Daryl Cooper, then you should also have on Zionist historians, and you should also have on Churchill historians so they can set the record straight, because a lot of what they said is debunkable, right? And then Dave Smith said, I hate Hitler and I hate racism. He's a libertarian. Of course he hates Hitler. Hitler was an authoritarian. Of course he hates racism. He wants all human beings to have individual rights and live without the authority of the government. So just because listen, I don't like Dave Smith either. I think Dave Smith is kind of a dummy. Okay. The fact that Nick is insinuating that this was like a fake debate where Joe Rogan, a multimillionaire, Dave Smith, probably a multimillionaire, Douglas Murray, definitely a multimillionaire, who are all involved in media. They needed money so bad that they set up a fake debate. That's crazy pants. I know Nick doesn't smoke pot, but honestly, that's like weed smoking epiphany dumb levels of idea. That is actually not even close to reality. And I feel like he's trying to appeal to the schizos in his audience in order to make that a part of the reality. Razzle says, it's not, though. It's called a limited hangout. They're throwing us a bone because the word is getting out. They want to appear reasonable as though they're in fact alternative. Well, I don't use alternative to describe alternative thoughts. Plenty of my thoughts are mainstream. When I say alternative media, I mean that they're not legacy media products, MSNBC, NBC, Fox News, all those like corporate establishments. I'm not a part of a corporate media company. I'm a part of a alternative media company. So just because I'm a part of an alternative media company doesn't mean that I don't share overlap with like legacy, right? I get what you're saying, though. You're saying that it's insufficiently alternative. It's astroturfed. It's actually mainstream media pretending to be alternative media, if I'm tracking you okay. Bud123 says, Douglas's reasoning is if you've never been there, you can't criticize Israel as bad. Yeah, that's dumb. Bud123, I agree with you that it's dumb. If I was to try to steelman that position, the position is that Dave Smith has been talking about Israel for 2 years and says wildly inconsistent things with like boots on the ground. He has the wealth and influence and power to go talk to, I don't know, IDF, Palestinian Authority, Omanis, Qataris. He could talk to anybody that he wanted to effectively just because he has the money and clout to do so. And yet he doesn't because it's inconvenient to his narrative. I think that's like the bigger criticism. Douglas Murray obviously did make that point, and that point is very stupid. You can absolutely talk about world events without having physically been there. And it's a bad point because it effectively limits discourse in a way that I don't think is good. Sacreds Now says, I don't agree with a lot of what Murray says, but I'm glad someone intelligent called Rogan out for heavily pushing proven disinformation and held his feet to the fire for it. Yeah, I agree. Like the whole GRE interaction with Flint Dibble is a ridiculous amount of anti-science. Yeah, there you go. And so what Douglas Murray's perspective, in my opinion, would be is you can have Flint Dibble on and talk to him, but you should either have an expert there so they can debate in person, or you should have an expert on afterwards. That way, if there's a bunch of misinformation, then you can effectively have an expert go over why it's misinformation or disinformation or malinformation. Bud123 says, Douglas argued for the Iraq war. He is the useful idiot for the wars that ended up in the regional instability. Well, listen, I'm the useful idiot for the regional instability. Ask me for my Iraq takes sometime. You'll absolutely hate them. So the same thing is true of Joe Rogan, though, and probably of Dave Smith. Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, let's continue.
It almost seems like a fake debate between two people that don't even really disagree. You have one.
Wrong. They disagree on whether or not Joe Rogan and Dave Smith are useful idiots for platforming dissident right-wing thought. That's what they disagreed with, not whether or not it's okay to be racist or whether or not it's okay to be anti-Israel.
Person saying, oh, no one can criticize Israel unless you're an expert.
No one said that.
You're pushing ideas that might tend towards extremism.
That's true.
And Dave Smith, apparently the representative of that, says, I'm not an extremist. Extremism is bad and we should condemn it.
I don't even think he said that. He said that he's extreme in the case of liberty. He said that he's an extremist in reference to libertarianism. So again, this is more like, I don't know, man. I don't feel like this is an accurate representation of the debate. I think this is like a vibes-based assessment where you can kind of assign people the worst positions possible. I actually don't think that this is a factual assessment of the conversation.
I'm a moderate. I just have some questions. So you're telling me our options are you have the mainstream narrative and then you have the mainstream narrative, but with some hyperbolic observations.
No, that's me. I'm the mainstream narrative with hyperbolic observations. He's talking about me. He's not talking about Dave Smith. Dave Smith is actually, no offense, Dave, my apologies to Ken, my apologies to my mother, my apologies to Christ, my apologies to the women in the room. Dave Smith is actually a retarded libertarian. So Nick is describing me, but he's calling out Dave Smith, and his call out is inaccurate. Did the one guy stop? Not really, but we've consumed a healthy chunk of content since our last one guy.
The mainstream narrative, but we're not going to go all the way and say that, maybe Hitler wasn't the devil incarnate or.
Okay. I watched this debate, so it's unfortunate that I know as much as I know. I also have like a decent short-term and long-term memory, so I know that Nick is just wrong. Dave Smith actually made this point early in the debate. He said that Hitler is so descriptively evil in history that he has taken the place of Satan as a description for evil incarnate. And he finds that ridiculous because he does want to be able to talk to people who have a more subtle analysis of history of Hitler that treats him like a human being instead of like the metaphysical incarnation of evil, right? So it's actually weird because Nick Fuentes is criticizing Dave Smith specifically on a point that Dave Smith himself made in the debate. So again, this is like an incorrect analysis of the actual conversation. I feel like he wasn't paying attention.
Or that, maybe there's a racial dimension to any of this.
I got to let the dogs out. 1 second.
And so I take all these three things together, and Tucker has promoted Dave Smith, and Tim Pool in the same show, he said Nick Fuentes is an extremist, but Dave Smith's really reasonable. So you have the three of them. And I don't know that Dave Smith has ever said this himself, but you've got people like Tucker, people like Alex Jones, Tim Pool, among others. Candace Owens has accused me of being a Fed. You have these people that are all promoting each other, and they're all saying anyone that's really pushing an alternative is not real. Anyone that is not in our club, anyone that is not cross-promoting each other, anyone that isn't still on YouTube, anyone that actually got censored, anyone that's actually independent, never got a contract from Fox or Daily Wire, anyone that's actually pushing an alternative on race and Jews, they're fake. They're botted. They're not real. We've seen the documents. They're with the SPLC. They're with the feds. Instead, look at the reasonable people. Look at the reasonable voices like Tucker, who says we should support Israel. I love Israel. I love going there. Jerusalem's my favorite city to go. And, we're not extremists and we're not white nationalists. We don't have any criticisms. We're against racialism. We just don't like this. We just don't like that.
Yeah, by the way, this is conservatism. So conservatism is progressivism or liberalism doing the speed limit. That is conservatism. That's what I support. That is a description of Burke, Edmund Burke's analysis of politics. He's the father of conservatism. That's what he says. So Nick is saying that mainstream conservatives and even alternative media conservatives or right wingers are insufficiently extreme to his taste, and therefore they're fake because they all play footsie with each other. But I'm just going to go ahead and describe it for you guys. I'll let him finish in a second, and then we'll probably be wrapping up. But the point is that there's a game of clout that everyone is playing. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to go full screen. It's fine. We're going to go full screen. There's a game of clout that every media creator plays. Okay. There are creators who are talented enough in order to be successfully independent. They're just so charismatic, so intelligent, so rhetorically gifted, so this, so that they are able to take a very small platform and blow it up. They're just that talented, okay? Then there is everyone else. I would say that's 1% of the population, and that's 1% of creators you know. There are just some creators who are so talented that they will blow up no matter what, okay? The rest of the creators, when it comes to political commentary or drama commentary, what they do is cross-pollination. They create good content, but they also interact with or comment on other creators within their niche who then enrich their algorithmic access. And what's even more fire, right? What's even more good for your career is collaborations or debates. Because what happens is if you're competing for the same audience, like Steven Crowder, Candace Owens, conservatives wake up and they can watch any of these creators. They could watch Alex Jones. They could watch Steven Crowder. They could watch Candace Owens. And so what they're hoping for when they refer to each other and when they debate each other, when they collaborate each other, not only are they upping the amount of people who are within the space, but they are also getting cross-pollination ripoffs where there's somebody who used to be or still is a fan of Crowder, but they prefer Candace. Or there used to be a person that was a fan of Candace, but then she said something crazy, so then they bounce over to Alex Jones. And Alex Jones was really funny this one day, but then Alex Jones said something that's too far, and so as a result, they bounce over to Tucker. So it's simultaneously trying to cross-pollinate an audience, so you guys all kind of get each other's viewers, but it's also growing the total amount of content consumed. Right? The reason why I viciously disagree with Tim Pool on so many things that probably 6 months ago I was cussing at him on Twitter. The dude legitimately pisses me off with some of his takes. But the second I got an invitation where it was like, hey, why don't you come on Tim Pool's show and debate? I was like, hell yeah, because there's centrists and disaffected liberals and moderate conservatives who watch Tim Pool, and I want them to see me make arguments that they probably haven't heard in years, and then maybe we'll get 3 or 4 or half a dozen or a few dozen who come over and check out our other content. So you have to understand the content game, and Nick is describing this as a conspiracy, whereas if you think about the self-interested motivations of all these people, it's more explanatory than his accusations of conspiracy. That's what I have to say. I invite you to like, share, and subscribe the video, and also to leave us comments down below. If you agree with me, if you agree with my assessments, go ahead and comment down below. If you disagree with me, if you don't like what I'm saying, go ahead and leave some comments down below.